Welcome back to In Your Neighborhood. I'm your host, Charlotte Brown. On today's show, we've been talking with Redwood Park Church and all the great initiatives that they're doing outside of just Sunday services. And I'd love to move into another initiative that you've been doing, which is Indigenous People Initiatives. So how did Redwood start on this road?
Well, Reg would probably know the history.
Well, I guess going back a little bit, initially the Opportunity Center was created about 10 years ago, shortly after we moved into the new building. We were originally going to sell the old building, but anyway, we ended up turning it into an Opportunity Center and a food bank. As a food bank, a large part of the clientele we serve are Aboriginal people, Indigenous people in the neighborhood, and that was one of our first contacts, if you wish. We also have had, we have a number of Indigenous people in our church, and we talk with them and try to reflect what needs to be done. A number of us also have been involved. I come from the college where I was involved in supporting the Indigenous learning there through Nagano College. I'm involved with the Walk a Mile project with the city, and so we did some awareness building in the church with films. And last year, for example, we did the Walk a Mile series of films with a group. So I guess we've just had, we believe that the Indigenous people of Thunder Bay are a huge part of our community. Northwestern Ontario is largely Indigenous people outside of Thunder Bay. And we just feel that we need to figure out how to support their aspirations.
Wonderful. And let's touch on some of those awareness building and partnerships that you've created in the community.
So I know Reg has, over the last years, within the Redwood community, they would have some film nights where they'd watch some films on Indigenous people and different issues, and he'd have speakers in, and they'd just raise awareness that way, having some people in our community talking about it. I guess for me, the connection that started with the Northern Community Mishkegogumang, which is about a 5.5-hour drive from Thunder Bay, started when I heard of a camp that was running up there that's been going for 10 years now, called Mish Adventures, and one of the women who had started the camp was connected to one of our staff, and so I had asked if I could go visit the camp 2 years ago. And so when I went up there, just seeing the way they did things with the youth, the kids there, was just phenomenal, and so different than maybe what you would expect, because I mean, really, the church doesn't have a great history with Indigenous people, a great reputation even. And so the way that they ran these camps was really taking youth from within the community and bringing them for leadership training down to Muskoka Woods for a week, and then bringing these 15, 16 youth back to Mish to lead the camp for the rest of the kids for the 3 weeks. And so the staff of the camp really just facilitated it, and it was a lot around culture building, just instilling, I guess, awareness of their own gifts and their own identities of who they are, and raising them up as leaders for their own community. And so that really, really resonated with me, because, I mean, it's really, I think, in line with the heart of Redwood, of what we're about to. And so we just started a connection there. And from that, the woman at the time was the executive assistant to Terry LeBlanc, who is the founder of Indigenous Pathways, a pretty well-known organization worldwide that is made up of Indigenous Christian leaders of the country. And so that kind of birthed the idea of bringing them up to Thunder Bay to further put together a conference that would maybe raise the awareness to another level within the church community in Thunder Bay. So.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that conference. So it was called Walking Together, and it was quite large. So
yeah, we ended up having almost 300 people there people from about 15 churches represented. There were people that came from Winnipeg, from Toronto, because of the speakers that we brought in, as they're pretty well known. The conference really was something, to the name Walking Together, looking at some of the history of our country, of what has happened in the past, where we are at now, and how we can walk together better in the future. And so it was a kind of just a moment to bring people together to explore the ideas of what can we do going forward.
Yeah, and it was a bunch of churches that sponsored it. It happened to be at Redwood because we had the right venue for it, but there were a number of churches that were involved in
in putting it
organizing and putting it together.
Nice. And was there any kind of key points that came from that you will be, implementing going forward, or things that have initiatives or new things that have came from that, or where's kind of the future for this initiative now with Redwood?
I know one of the biggest things that came out of it for a lot of people was just that awareness. I mean, many of us have, in the school system, they haven't taught now they're starting to teach Indigenous issues more in the school system, but they didn't for even my generation and older. And so just that understanding of the history has brought a whole different, perception to some of the people who just didn't know before. We live we live together with a lot of Indigenous people in Thunder Bay,
right.
And without that awareness, it's really easy to just fall into the stereotypes, the racism, the thoughts that have been around for years. And so that awareness was a huge piece in giving people the encouragement, the motivation to really look at, how can I play a part in making a better future for Thunder Bay, of working together and,
Right.
just being better people. So we don't have at this time plans to do another conference like that, but the hope was that from this conference, the various churches would take what they learned from there and then kind of put it into practice in a way that works for them. So for us, building a relationship with Mish has been one of those huge parts of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Education is key, right? When we know better, we can do better. And I know you mentioned the Walk a Mile films. I encourage people, if they haven't seen those, to definitely watch them, because you'll learn a lot, and you can see history for yourself if you haven't learned it in school, like you said. So let's talk a little bit about the Opportunity Center. It also houses the second largest food bank in the city. So let's talk a little bit about that.
I'll let you.
Our food bank and the Opportunity Center has been running for about 10 years now, since we moved into the new building and decided not to sell the old one. So we had this idea of a food bank. It's been funded also by a used clothing store, Threads, that has been running there for 10 years. And then we've had some rental groups that have also helped to pay for the expenses of the place. Our food bank serves about 60 to 80 families per week.
Wow.
Over half of those people are children. And so we have a big number of volunteers that have been there for this entire 10 years, and other ones that have come on board. And the food comes from RFDA, different grocery stores. Last year, we actually developed a community garden on our church property to help supplement when a new Ontario mandate prohibited grocery stores from giving their produce anymore to food banks. So in order to be able to give fresh produce to these families, we started a garden that is purely run by volunteers. And we had some of our small groups at the church too that actually built gardens or designated gardens for the food bank. So it's been a neat initiative there too.
Awesome. Well, you're doing a lot of great work over at Redwood Park Church. If people watching want to get involved, want to learn more about helping out, volunteering, anything to do with the refugee family, where would be the best place for them to go?
Checking out the website, redwoodpark.ca, is one way. Calling the office at 577-3463, or just coming to one of our services on Sundays. We have services at 9:45 and 11:30 are the new times.
Right.
And there's full childcare there, kids programming from age 0 right up to 13, 14 years old. And then the main service. And so that would be the best place to come over and meet some people, connect, and
find out
check it
everything
out.
that you're doing. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you, Annika and Reg, for being on the show today and enlightening us about all the great work that Redwood Park Church is doing here in the city. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. Be sure to watch next week with more on In Your Neighborhood.